She lit a candle every year for her missing son for 24 years straight. But the moment she saw his face on live TV, bloody, handcuffed, and accused, she didn't cry. She knew that was him, and she would burn the whole truth down to bring him home. Before we continue the story, I just want to say thank you for listening. I'm just a small storyteller, and if this touched you, please consider hitting that subscribe button for more heartwarming stories like this one. Let me know in the comments where and what time you're listening from. I read them all. Now, let's hear the story. Loretta Hayes didn't cry anymore when she lit the candle. After 24 years, the tears had dried into a kind of silence, one that wrapped around her like a second coat as she stepped out of her apartment and into the chill of another April morning. The street was quiet, too quiet, just the way it always was on this day. She walked the 2 blocks to New Zion Baptist Church with a paper bag in her hands. Inside, a plain white candle, a black and white photo of an 8-year-old boy in a Spider-Man shirt, and a weathered cardboard sign that simply read, Malik Hayes, missing since April 14th, 1999. Never stopped looking. The steps of the church hadn't changed. The railings still bent slightly on the left side, where Malik used to slide down during Sunday school recess. He was always smiling back then, always bursting with laughter, always asking 100 questions about things that didn't matter, and yet somehow did. Loretta knelt and set the items down like she had every year since the day he vanished from a church picnic held right behind these very walls. Back then, everyone had come out in support. Posters, flyers, prayer chains, volunteers combing through the woods behind the building. But years passed. Leaves dried up. The community turned its attention to newer tragedies. Malik's face on the flyers faded from a shared mission to a familiar heartbreak. But not for Loretta. God doesn't forget his children, she whispered as she struck the match. Her hands trembled as the flame caught. And neither do I. Behind her, the church door creaked. Pastor Alvin Ricks stepped outside, his Bible tucked beneath one arm. He was older now, with more gray in his beard than black, and the same weight in his eyes she'd seen every April for 2 decades. He didn't say anything at first, just nodded and stood beside her, hands in his pockets. Only one this year? He asked gently. Loretta smiled faintly. Just me. That's all it ever was. He looked down at the candle. He'd be 33 now. Don't say it like he's gone, Loretta said. Not angry, just firm. Alvin hesitated, then gave a soft, forgive me, and turned back inside. From across the street, a car slowed, then stopped. Nia Clark leaned over her steering wheel, her eyes narrowing at the flame flickering on the church steps. She'd heard about Loretta before. Everyone local had. But Nia had never actually seen the vigil. Not in person. Something pulled her to the curb. Maybe curiosity. Maybe guilt. She stepped out, slinging her press badge around her neck. Loretta glanced up. You here to ask me if I've given up yet? Loretta asked. No, ma'am, Nia said softly. Just here to witness. She lifted her phone and snapped a photo. Loretta kneeling at the foot of the church, flame glowing beneath the boy's photo, eyes closed in prayer. It was haunting and honest. She uploaded it to her personal account with 5 words. She never missed a year. Hashtag 24 years of faith. And then she left, not knowing the whole world would see that photo in 2 days, and that it would save a life. Inside the church, Elder Vernon Holtz sat behind the organ, stiff as stone. He hadn't spoken to Loretta in years, not since the investigation went cold. He still remembered the day of the church picnic. He'd organized it, assigned volunteers, watched the kids, watched Malik get lured toward the side gate by a new youth counselor, a man with a clipboard, a cross necklace, and no last name. Vernon never told anyone what he'd seen. He convinced himself he was wrong. And by the time guilt crept in, it was too late. Every April, Loretta's presence brought that guilt back. And this year, it pressed heavier than usual. That night, Loretta returned home, her legs aching. She sat by the window with her Bible and her tea, still wearing her Sunday shoes. She watched the candle's flame in her mind long after it had burned out. She didn't hear her phone buzz the first time, or the second, but when it rang, sharp and shrill, she jumped. She fumbled for it. Unknown caller. She almost didn't answer. But something, instinct, fate, something made her tap the screen. The voice on the other end wasn't someone she knew. It was her neighbor's niece, Tasha, breathless and wide-eyed. "Miss Loretta, turn on the news. Channel 7. Right now." Loretta grabbed the remote. Her fingers shook. The screen lit up. Live coverage. Police sting in downtown Atlanta. The camera panned across flashing red and blue lights. Officers shouting. A chaotic street corner. Then it paused on a young man in handcuffs. His face turned toward the camera, bruised and defiant. Loretta stood up so fast she knocked her tea over. She pressed a hand to her mouth. The scar on his right cheek. His eyes. His face. Older. Worn. But him. "Malik," she breathed. Then louder. "That's my baby." And for the first time in 24 years, she cried. At the precinct, the booking room was cold, all tile and fluorescent buzz. Malik didn't flinch as Officer Brielle Morton read him his rights. He'd been through this before. Handcuffs, barking cops, forms, lies. This time was supposed to be simple. Wrong place, wrong friends, wrong bag in the wrong car. He hadn't even known what they were carrying. But it didn't matter. The cops weren't interested in the story. Just the image. "Name?" Brielle asked, her voice flat. He hesitated, looked down at his shoes, then muttered, "Deshaun Brooks." She typed it in. It didn't come up. She tried again. Still nothing. "You got ID?" she asked. He shook his head. "It was taken when y'all slammed me on the sidewalk." She squinted at him. "Date of birth." He said like a reflex, April 14th, 1991. Something in her paused. "That date. Today. He was arrested on his birthday." "You sure?" she asked. Malik looked her in the eye. "I've been sure my whole life." But he hadn't. Not really. Something inside him had always felt off. Like his memories were built on sand. So went back to age 13. Nothing before that. Just static. Shadows. The feeling of always moving. Different homes. Different names. Nobody ever told him why. Back at Loretta's apartment, she couldn't sit. She paced in circles, phone clenched in her palm like a lifeline. She called the station. They stonewalled her. No, they couldn't give her any information. No, she couldn't come down and identify someone without cause. No, they couldn't confirm if the man in the footage was Malik Hayes. She called Nia Clark next. "I saw the live stream," Loretta said, breathless. "You saw it too, right?" Nia had been watching it in a replay loop for the last 20 minutes. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "And I think you're right." "That's him," Loretta whispered. "I swear to God, that's my boy." Nia pulled up the photo she took at the Vigil. 8-year-old Malik in the Spider-Man shirt, holding a balloon. She placed it next to a screenshot of the arrested man's face. The scar on the cheek. The same slope in the brow. Eyes. Not just similar, identical. Nia grabbed her bag. "I'm going to the station," she said. "And I'm bringing your photo." Inside the precinct, Officer Morton was sitting with the form half-filled when a plainclothes man came in. Internal Affairs. He dropped a sealed envelope in front of her. "City's using Rapid Link on this one," he said. "Judge authorized expedited DNA match for unidentified suspects in organized crime cases. Take the swab." Morton raised an eyebrow. "You're skipping consent?" "Not up for debate." She looked back at Malik, Deshaun, and something tugged at her. She picked up the swab. "Open your mouth." He hesitated. "What is it?" "Just DNA confirmation. It'll clear your name if you're not in the system." He stared at her like she just pulled a knife. They always say that. Still, he opened his mouth. She swabbed. Bagged. Labeled. He was returned to the holding cell. And Morton just stood there for a second, staring at the form. The name wasn't his. She could feel it. An hour later, Nia arrived. She pushed past the front desk with a press badge and a printed flyer of Malik's missing child report. "I'm not here to cause problems," she said, calm but firm. "I just need to speak to whoever's booking the man arrested today in the downtown sting. The one who gave the name Deshaun Brooks." Morton came out. Nia showed her the flyer. Morton stared at it for a long time. The boy. The birthday. The date. The scar. "Jesus," she whispered. "I think he's a missing person," Nia said. "From 1999. Morton took the flyer. Said nothing else. Disappeared in the back. Meanwhile, Loretta sat at her dining table with the photo albums spread wide. She was preparing. If they asked her to prove anything, she would have every record, every memory, School reports, doctor visits, old drawings. She didn't realize how many pages Malik had filled before he vanished. Back at the station, the DNA swab was running through the system. Morton stared at the screen, hands trembling. Hit, match found. Malik Darnell Hayes. Missing child. 1999. She backed away from the computer. Oh my God, she muttered. The system flagged the record, alerting multiple agencies at once. Within minutes, 2 plain black cars pulled up, men in suits. State officials. Morton knew what that meant. They weren't here to help the kid. They were here to control the story. She made a copy of the match report, slid it into her jacket. She walked out front and told Nia, "He's your boy. It's confirmed." Nia's eyes widened. "I need to talk to his mother," Morton said. "Now." Officer Brielle Morton stood in Loretta Hayes' living room holding a truth too heavy for paper. The man who'd been arrested on live television, the one Loretta had wept for, was not just a suspect. He was the boy who'd vanished from a church picnic 24 years ago, and the system wanted to bury it. Loretta's house was modest but warm. Framed photos lined the mantel. Family portraits that aged year by year without Malik. His spot in the group photo always left empty, not by mistake but by hope. Morton laid a single sheet of paper on the table. The DNA match confirmation. Loretta stared at it. "I knew it," she whispered. "You did," Morton said. "He's alive." Morton's throat tightened. "Yes, but Mrs. Hayes, it's complicated." Loretta looked up, eyes burning. "I don't care how complicated it is. That's my son." Morton sat. She took a breath. "He's been through hell." Loretta froze. Morton explained everything she'd learned since the DNA pinged. The group home that took him in under a fake name. The facility, Harvest Path Youth Outreach, wasn't a youth program at all. It was a front for funneling runaway and abducted children into criminal networks under the guise of rehabilitation. His file shows he was picked up as a drifter in early 2004. He had no ID, barely spoke. They changed his name to Deshaun Brooks and placed him into that facility. And no one checked? Loretta asked, voice low. They didn't want to, Morton said. Kids like him? They disappear twice. Once when they go missing, and once when the system decides they're not worth finding. Loretta reached out and touched the paper like it was her son's hand. Is he safe? Morton hesitated. They're transferring him to county. He's facing multiple charges. Robbery, resisting arrest, obstruction. It's messy. Loretta stood. Take me to him. I'll try. But the state's already trying to seize control of the case. Across town, Nia Clark was digging through archives like her job depended on it, because it did. Her photo of Loretta's candlelight vigil had reached over 700,000 shares in a day. But now, her inbox was full of NDAs, cease and desist notices, and veiled threats. Something bigger was at play. She went to the county records building and requested sealed files on Harvest Path Youth Outreach. Access denied, said the clerk. Nia smirked. I thought you might say that. She already had a contact in the archives, former journalist turned night guard, Ellis Rowe. He met her in the stairwell and handed her a flash drive. You didn't get this from me, he said. And if you run it, expect heat. Back in her car, she opened the files. The documents were damning. Dozens of boys processed through Harvest Path with no ID, no birth records, and no follow-ups. Many ended up in juvenile detention. Some simply vanished. One name repeated. Rufus Holt. Nia's eyes widened. She pulled up her notes. Rufus Holt, cousin of Elder Vernon Holt, longtime deacon of New Zion Baptist. And the same man Loretta claimed was supervising the kids the day Malik went missing. Nia hit record. This is Nia Clark, Channel 14. What I'm holding is the key to a decades-long cover-up involving a missing boy, a corrupted youth facility, and the people who let him vanish without asking a single question. At New Zion Baptist, Elder Vernon Holt stood before a dwindling congregation. Pastor Alvin Ricks led the sermon, but Vernon's thoughts were elsewhere. Sweat beaded beneath his collar. He saw the news, saw Malik's face, saw Loretta's photo trending. The guilt, once dull and buried, now screamed in his ear. After service, he moved quickly down the hall, hoping to avoid questions. But Pastor Rick stopped him. You knew, Rick said. Vernon flinched. Don't start. You saw who took him. Vernon looked at the floor. It was Rufus. My cousin. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because by the time I realized something was wrong, he was gone. And I didn't have proof. You had a child's life. Vernon's voice cracked. He swore he was helping. Said the boy had no mother. Said he'd been abandoned. I believed him. You buried it. I was scared. Now do the right thing, Pastor Rick said. Say it. Publicly. In the holding cell, Malik sat on the floor with his back to the wall. He'd been offered a lawyer, refused. Been asked about his past, ignored it. The guards thought he was being defiant. But inside, Malik was unraveling. Why had the woman on the news looked at him like that? Why had the cop whispered, April 14th, like it meant something? Why couldn't he remember anything before 13? He dug into his pocket. They hadn't found the necklace. A tiny brass pendant, tarnished, bent. He didn't know where it came from, but he had it since forever. It had one word etched into the back. Malik. He didn't know what it meant. Just that it felt warm. Morton returned with Loretta in tow. I pulled every favor I had, she told the guard. 5 minutes. Loretta stood behind the glass. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. Malik stepped up slowly, confused. Why are you here? He asked. She just stared. You were 8, she whispered. You had a loose tooth and cried for 3 days because you thought the tooth fairy forgot you. I taped $1 to your window. His mouth parted. You hated green beans. You loved thunderstorms. You never liked being alone. He stepped back. I don't know you, he said. You don't remember me, she said gently. But I remember you. He reached into his pocket. He held up the pendant. Malik, he said, like it was a spell he'd never said aloud. Loretta gasped. You kept it, she whispered. Then the guard ended the visit. That night, Nia aired her segment. She dropped the files. Named the names. Rufus Holt. Harvest Path. Vernon Holt's silence. The system that let Malik disappear twice. It went national in 12 hours. Vernon resigned the next morning. Loretta stayed home and waited. For the first time in 24 years, she didn't light the candle. Because her son was alive. But he wasn't free. Vernon Holt stood at the pulpit. Not to preach, but to confess. He didn't use notes. He didn't look at anyone. The pews were half empty, the air tight with tension, and no one breathed as he began to speak. A live mic had been set up by the church board. Transparency, they said. Public accountability. That morning, a local camera crew stood silently in the back. Nia Clark watched from the third row, her phone in her lap already recording. I failed him, Vernon said. I failed Malik Hayes. I failed Loretta. And I failed this church. He talked about Rufus, his cousin. How he vouched for him because he wore a cross and carried a clipboard. How he vouched for him because he called himself youth security and said the right words. Vernon had helped him set up the water stations for the picnic. He remembered Rufus talking to the kids. He remembered Malik laughing at something Rufus whispered. He remembered how Rufus slipped away before the food was even served. He left, and so did Malik. And I never saw either again. He admitted he didn't tell the police about Rufus. That he thought it was a coincidence. That he convinced himself the boy had wandered. That maybe he was in denial. That maybe he was a coward. I was afraid of what it meant. That someone I trusted could take a child. I told myself if I said nothing, it would go away. But it didn't. And now we all know that. The silence afterward wasn't forgiveness. It was heavy, unforgiving. Loretta didn't attend the service. She watched it on her phone in her living room. She didn't need to be in the room to know Vernon was broken. It didn't change the years she'd spent standing alone in the rain. It didn't bring back Malik's 9th birthday. His 10th. His high school graduation. She muted the screen halfway through. She didn't need apologies. She needed her son. At the county jail, Malik sat across from a public defender who barely glanced at him while reading through his file. You've got multiple priors under the name Deshaun Brooks. Petty theft, unlawful possession, resisting arrest. You're not looking great. Malik didn't speak. You're not even trying to fight this? Still silence. The defender sighed. All right, you want to rot in here, fine. But we're filing for a psychiatric eval. You don't talk, they'll assume trauma or a mental break. That gets you moved to a facility. Malik looked up for the first time. Will I be alone? The lawyer blinked. Excuse me? In the facility? Will I have a room to myself? The lawyer tilted his head. Why does that matter? Malik just sat back. Later that night, Officer Morton visited him again, unofficially. She didn't wear her uniform. She brought with her a paper bag with two things inside: a box of strawberry Pop-Tarts and a folded-up photo. When Malik opened the bag, his breath caught. He stared at the photo. It was him, age 7, his arms around Loretta's neck, both of them laughing. Behind them, a birthday cake with green frosting. He touched it with 2 fingers, slowly, like it might vanish. "I asked your mother what your favorite snack was," Morton said. "I haven't had these in 20 years, he muttered. "I know." He didn't eat them. He just held the box. "She's not going to give up on you," Morton said. "Even if you don't remember. She already lost you once. You think she cares what the courts say? You're her son." "I'm nobody's anything," he said. "Do you know what that necklace meant?" she asked. Malik nodded. "It's my name. That's more than a lot of people have." He stared at the photo again. "How many kids did they do this to?" he asked quietly. Morton leaned forward. "Dozens. Some got trafficked out of state. Some disappeared. You're one of the only ones they've found still breathing." Malik looked up. "Why me?" "I don't know," she said. "But I think you were supposed to survive." Meanwhile, Nia Clark released her second report. It aired on the local evening news, then exploded online within hours. The state was implicated. Internal memos proved that multiple agencies had been aware of Harvest Path's abuse for over a decade. A signed contract showed that the city paid out hush money to one family in 2011 after a child died in custody. That report had been buried. Now it was public. Within 48 hours, the governor issued a public statement. Investigations were reopened. Arrests were made. Former staff of Harvest Path were subpoenaed, and the public wanted more. The judge overseeing Malik's case was suddenly under pressure. Advocacy groups began speaking out. A GoFundMe for Loretta hit $85,000 in one day. But Malik still hadn't walked free. He refused to see Loretta again. Not yet. She wrote him letters every day. He didn't respond, but he kept them, folded them into a notebook he'd started keeping in the corner of his cell. He didn't write back, but he copied her handwriting, practiced the loops of her lowercase y's. One night, just before lights out, another inmate tossed a rolled-up magazine into his cell. It was the latest issue of a weekly human rights publication. Malik opened it. There was a 2-page spread. The headline read, "The Boy Who Was Taken Twice." And there, beneath it, was a photo of Loretta on the church steps, lighting a candle. He stared at it for a long time. The next morning, he asked to see the chaplain. And when the chaplain came, Malik said, "I think I want to go home, but I don't know what that is." The chaplain smiled. "You'll figure it out. You're starting now." Back at home, Loretta sat at the table preparing Sunday dinner. She made 2 plates. One stayed untouched. She'd wait, as long as it took. And this time, she wouldn't be lighting a candle. Because now, there was a light on in her son's eyes again, even if he didn't know it yet. Malik stepped out of the county jail 3 weeks later with nothing but a plastic bag, a packet of discharge papers, and a silence so thick it seemed to swallow the air around him. He didn't ask for a ride, didn't call Loretta, didn't look back. Officer Brielle Morton had done what she could, fast-tracked the process, cleared the false priors, coordinated with the DA's office, and even filed her own affidavit confirming the abuse Malik had endured at Harvest Path. But the moment the release order was signed, Malik reverted inward. "I'll find my way," he said. "I always have." He was placed in transitional housing, a small, government-funded halfway home in South Atlanta, run by a quiet ex-nun who didn't ask too many questions. He got a cot by the window and a shelf with peeling paint. It was more than he'd had in years. And for the first time in his adult life, Malik had space to sit still. But peace didn't follow. He spent his mornings cleaning the facility, his afternoons walking aimlessly through neighborhoods that felt like ghost towns of memories he couldn't reach. He passed playgrounds that stirred nothing, churches that looked familiar but rang hollow, stores that felt like fragments of a dream he couldn't wake up from. At night, he lay in bed and reread Loretta's letters. He had saved them all, dozens of them, written in ink so carefully it looked like love poured onto the page. "My sweet boy, you don't have to remember me for me to remember you. You don't have to come back right now. Just know the door isn't locked." He never wrote back, but he started writing in a small notebook. Not to her, To himself, pages filled with questions he didn't have answers to. Who was I before them? What did they take? What part of me is still mine? One Saturday, he wandered past a library and stepped inside. He found an old photo archive terminal and typed in his own name. Missing, Malik Hayes, age 8. Last seen April 14th, 1999. Atlanta, Georgia. There were the pictures, flyers, press conferences, footage of Loretta crying into microphones, church vigils, rallies, an old newscast showing little Malik school artwork taped to a chain-link fence. One of them said, "When I grow up, I want to be a firefighter." He stared at that one for a long time. That night, he called the halfway house's landline from a payphone across the street. Nurse June speaking, the voice answered. "It's me," he said. "Malik." He paused. "Do I have any mail?" June hesitated. "You got one this morning." He exhaled. "Don't open it," he said. "I'll come get it." That envelope contained no letter, just a key. The next day, Malik stood on the porch of a small home tucked in a quiet part of Vine City. The number on the mailbox had been scratched off and repainted. The porch light had been replaced with a solar one. He didn't knock right away. Loretta opened the door before he could. She stood there, still in her housecoat, eyes wide, unsure whether to cry or smile. He looked at her like he was seeing a stranger who had haunted his dreams. She opened the screen door. "I made too much breakfast." He said nothing. "I always make 2 plates. You don't have to eat." "I'm not hungry," he whispered. "You don't have to stay long." "I don't know what to say." She stepped aside. "Then don't say anything." He entered. The hallway smelled like cinnamon and furniture polish. The walls held framed photos he didn't recognize, family he'd never known, graduations he didn't attend. One frame had no photo, just a scrap of paper that said, "Waiting for Malik." He stared at it. She brought out a plate of pancakes, sat it on the table. She sat across from him with her tea. No words, just air and presence. After 5 minutes, he picked up the fork. He didn't cry. Neither did she. But for the first time in years, she saw him chew slowly, quietly, like someone trying to remember how to taste. She reached into the cabinet and brought out a shoebox. Inside were toys, drawings, his Spider-Man watch, a napkin with his handprint in faded paint. She laid it on the table like holy scripture. Malik reached out and touched it. "I remember this. You love that watch," she said. "I lost it." "No," she said. "You had it on when you disappeared." His throat tightened. That night, he didn't go back to the halfway house. He didn't say he was staying, either. He just sat in the guest room on the edge of the bed, staring at the dresser while Loretta folded linens beside him. "I'm not who I was," he finally said. Loretta nodded. "Neither am I." In the morning, he was gone. Left a note. "Thank you for the pancakes." She didn't panic, didn't call the police. She just sat at the table and whispered grace. 2 weeks passed. Nia Clark was prepping her final feature segment, a piece called "The Son Who Survived." Malik had declined all interviews. She respected that. Then one morning, Nia turned on the TV and dropped her coffee. Malik was on the screen again, not as a suspect, not in a mugshot, but in handcuffs. He had been arrested at a gas station, this time for obstruction and possession, caught in a sting targeting remnants of the very same criminal ring that had once held him. 2 other men had been taken into custody, both from the same group home Malik had been in. Authorities claimed all 3 were armed, but one witness said otherwise. They were trying to protect the kid they were with, the woman said. The young boy. They hit him. Cops found nothing, just yelled and tackled him. Loretta sat in front of the television, stunned. Another wave. Another blow. Malik had been free for barely a month, and now he was behind bars again. But this time, she wasn't alone. This time, the world was watching. The media twisted it immediately. Repeat offender caught in multi-suspect drug sting. Known former inmate arrested again weeks after release. They used the same photo, the one of Malik in handcuffs, looking downward, his face hard and unreadable. They didn't mention the 2 other men arrested were also former victims of Harvest Path. They didn't mention the 14-year-old boy they'd shielded from police. They didn't mention that Malik hadn't been armed. But the public remembered. Loretta had no more tears to give. She simply buttoned up her coat, packed a thermos of tea, and walked to the courthouse. This time, she wasn't alone. When she arrived, dozens of women were already there. Black mothers, grandmothers, former foster kids, social workers, survivors of silence. Some held signs. Others held candles. Unlit, the wicks dry, but waiting. One held a banner that read, "He didn't survive to be caged again." Loretta stepped to the front of the crowd. She didn't raise her voice, but everyone heard her. "I didn't come here today to beg," she said. "I didn't come here to make excuses. I came because my son survived what most children don't. And because of that, they want him to disappear again." The cameras flashed. The crowd hushed. He was taken at 8 years old. Stolen, erased, renamed, abused. And when he finally crawled out of that darkness, the system tried to swallow him again. "I won't let it." Inside, Malik sat behind bulletproof glass, again in a tan jumpsuit. His new court-appointed lawyer sat beside him, tapping his pen. "They're offering a plea," the lawyer said. 18 months. Probation after that. "What happens if I fight it? They'll throw everything at you. You'll be a headline for the wrong reason." Malik sat back, looked at his hands. They were no longer shaking. "What about the others?" "They walk. You take the hit for all three. No trial. No noise." Malik stared through the glass to the hallway beyond. Loretta's name was circled on the visitor log. Again, he tapped the table once. "I'll take the deal." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "You sure? They've taken everything from me already. I'm not letting them take those boys too." When sentencing day came, Loretta sat in the second row. Pastor Ricks was beside her. So was Nia Clark, pen in hand, no camera crew this time. Just a notebook and a fire behind her eyes. Malik entered in shackles, shoulders square. He didn't look afraid. He looked done with running. Their eyes met. Loretta didn't cry. She mouthed one word. "Son." He blinked, and in that blink, something cracked. The judge, aware of the national attention, gave the ruling short and exact. 18 months. Served in a rehabilitative transitional facility, not jail. He would receive therapy, education, job training. A new start. When Malik arrived at the facility, a counselor handed him a clean folder with his real name printed neatly across the front. Malik Darnell Hayes. He stared at it for a long time before placing it under his pillow that night, unopened. He wasn't ready, but it was there waiting. Time moved differently inside. It was slower, but not cruel. He woke early, joined the kitchen crew, began reading in the afternoons. He started writing again. At first, it was messy fragments. Then letters. He wrote to the 14-year-old boy they protected. He wrote to the 2 brothers who were free because he stayed behind. And finally, he wrote to Loretta. The first 5 letters he tore up. He couldn't get it right. He didn't want to say too much or too little. He didn't know how to be someone's child again. But he remembered the pancakes. The 6th letter he sent. It said, "I still don't remember how to be a son, but I remember the pancakes. And I want to come home." Loretta received that letter the day before his scheduled release. She didn't scream, didn't cry. She walked into the guest room and made the bed. Fresh sheets. Malik's old Spider-Man pillowcase she'd never thrown away. She dusted off the photo of him as a child and set it beside the letter, now framed. She baked banana bread, not because he'd asked, but because it had been his favorite. She left the porch light on, and then she waited. On release day, Malik didn't call ahead, didn't warn her. He just came. It was raining, light but steady. The streets shimmered under street lamps. He stood at her porch, soaked through, unsure if he should knock or just turn around. Then the door opened before he touched it. Loretta stood there, framed in the golden hallway light, her hands clutching the doorknob as if it anchored her to the earth. Neither spoke. He stepped inside. The house smelled like warmth, like nutmeg and fresh linen, like someone had been waiting a very long time for him to come home. He took off his shoes, left them by the door, and followed her into the kitchen. There were 2 plates set. He sat at one. She poured him tea. No camera crews. No reporters. No one explaining anything to the world. Just a mother and a son, and silence finally being kind. That night, she didn't light the candle. She didn't need to, because he was home, and this time he was staying.